Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today I'm going to talk about the Zen Signature Set from iFi. This is the Hifiman edition. It sells for $600. They also make a Meze audio version and a Sennheiser version, all $600. They just have a slightly different EQ tweak when you press the button on the amp. I'll get into how all that works after and talk about how that affects the sound quality, but I just want to start with the basics. So this was sent to me for review by iFi, just as they did with the Zen DAC Air. And just like the Zen DAC Air, they don't ask for any particular feedback or condition the review at all. It's fully open and honest. I will be comparing this to the Hifiman EF400 as well as the topping A30 stack, because I think in this price range, those are other ones a lot of people will be in the market for as well. And naturally, how well all of those pair with the Hifiman headphones around me. Now, as far as what you get in the box, I'm not going to do a full unboxing. Obviously, I always feel that can waste too much time unless it's really needed. But you get a separate box for your amp. You get a separate package in the middle, almost like a nice ice cream sandwich, of your shielded cable, which is a 14 gauge cable, by the way. This thing is super robust. It looks and feels amazing. And it's 12 inches long, end to end. And then obviously you get a separate box for the DAC. Now, both units come with the same power supply. This is a 5-volt output power supply. It has a nice little soft red LED glow when it's plugged in. The DAC does work without the power supply. However, it's recommended to use it naturally. Anytime you have the entire signal chain on the same exact voltage and power, you eliminate potential ground mismatching or hum issues, things like that. So use it if you can. However, it did still work fine with just USB power, both on PC and Mac. Now, iFi actually gives you a USB 3.0 cable inside the box as well, even though it's not needed. And I tested this because I used a USB 2.0 A to B cable. It's nice that they include it. Now, my honest thought, I think the cable is too short. I didn't use it on the Zen DAC Air, and I didn't use it on my combo set here, the Signature set, because it was too short. I couldn't plug it in the way I wanted. So I used the B cable out of necessity at the time, and it worked fine. Eventually, I switched to the 3.0 cable. I really don't think it's going to make a noticeable difference in sound quality because it's data, but it worked fine either way. I don't know if they use the 3.0 just for a more reliable signal or a stronger connection, if you will, but at least you have the flexibility of running either one. So as far as like the design, layout, and buttons go, let's start with the DAC. So the DAC has a volume knob on the front, which has a really nice feeling aluminum knob. Even the DAC weighs over a pound. It's a metal chassis and it feels amazing in hand. Very durable, it's easy to chip, it's an anodized aluminum, so you want to be careful, that you're not accidentally dropping a headphone cable on it or a plug or a USB charge cable. This type of finish is typically not as durable when it comes to nicks and scratches, but it looks stunning when it's in great condition. So if we go to the back of the DAC, so the left switch on my left is a variable fixed switch. Now this volume knob, if you have it set to fixed, this volume knob does nothing. If you have it set to variable, now you can change the RCA pre-out volume. So if you're using this DAC to connect to an external amplifier and it is a fixed volume, for example, then you could switch, or whatever the use case may be. Maybe you're connecting this to monitor speakers as well. So the volume knob there will help as far as your variable output goes. You have your RCA RCA output. So I'll get on this because that made me misspeak. This is a single input. It has USB only. There's no optical or coax. Some people may not be happy about that, but this is designed to be a desktop amp stack. So just make sure you consider that if you're weighing in your options. The Hifiman EF400 amp, which is an integrated DAC amp, also only has USB. The topping stack, the A30, has optical and coaxial as well. It just does things differently. I'll talk about it more in detail, but I don't want to miss covering that. So anyway, you have your balanced output and your RCA output. You can choose which one. It comes with an RCA cable in the box, but obviously when you buy the Signature set, use the balanced cable. It looks beautiful. It's super easy and clean looking on the backside, and it sounds better. You have a stronger signal output. And then of course you have your 5-volt DC input. Moving on to the headphone amp, there's a lot more buttons up front. So you have your power switch. When you press it, the lights will blink for a sec as it's booting up or warming up essentially. You have your input button, which I'll show you the back in a moment. Your gain, so you have 0, 6, 12, and 18 decibel steps. This thing is crazy powerful, and even when I use the Aria Stealth or the HE1000 SE, I never needed to go past my 6 dB gain. If you're doing like heavy EQ or you have a very quiet source, then yeah, you may want to go to a higher gain. But iFi typically wants your volume knob to be at least the 11 o'clock position, like 11 to 1 is ideal. So you usually want to dial in your gain to make sure that your pot is in that position. Speaking of that, this thing feels amazing. Just like this, they have the same resistance to it, so it's not an inconsistent feeling, which is good. That's good attention to detail. This isn't notchy and this is smooth, for example. Resistance feels the same. You have your larger quarter inch or 6.3 millimeter headphone jack, obviously a unbalanced connection, and then have your 4.4 Pentacon. Then this little button here is the HFM, which is your balanced connection, by the way. And then you have this button, which is HFM and XSpace. So I'll show you the speeds and specs and feeds and all that stuff here in a moment on the screen. But the big selling point with this is this button. I'm going to talk about how that affects sound quality, but as from a functional standpoint, you can use this amp with both disabled. There'll be no lights, and that is a true to source flat signal. This is a very clean amp, very neutral amp. HFM has a custom EQ designed for the sound signature of Hifiman planars. XSpace has a mix of like crossfeed and slight EQ change, I noticed, but it will affect the way the headphone images on your head. And then if you press it a third time, you can actually enable both at the same time. Pressing it again turns that feature off. Moving on to the back of the amp. So you have a balanced input, a single-ended input. So if you have your, a standard aux input from another device, you can use that. And then your standard RCA, and then another balanced output. So you can send the signal chain from this back out to something else, fully balanced. As far as connecting it goes, they even put the ports on the same side. So again, the little attention to detail thing, you have your, if you can see on the overhead, this stacks nicely like that. Then you're going to have your 2 power cords on this side and then your USB. And if you're using the stack as intended and designed, that's all you'll see. And it's a very nice, clean approach. Now, as far as specs go, there is so much to discuss to a point where I'm actually just going to stick with some on-screen graphics to save you time. So feel free to pause it to get an understanding of the output. So as you can see, depending on which headphone impedance you're using or what your gain setting is, etc., you have a huge range of output power from 32 ohm all the way up to 600. More than enough juice, and that's why I was saying earlier, I typically didn't need to go past the 6 decibel boost for all of my Hifiman headphones. They're actually fairly sensitive for the most part, so it's very easy to drive. Now, as far as power consumption goes, this is becoming a bigger topic now, especially with things happening over in Europe. So if you're watching this in Europe and you're looking at power Hifiman headphones, the power consumption can be as little as 0.5 watts for this entire stack if the DAC is idle and you have your headphone amp turned off. If you turn your headphone amp on and just leave it on idle, so it's not connected to a headphone, you're at about 5.5 watts. And you're peaking just over 15 watts at maximum load. So they're very, very efficient amplifiers. 15 watts is not much more than what a cell phone can charge at, so which is great. So now it's time to talk about sound quality, obviously the most important part of an audio product. And let's start with the basics. So when you have the HFM or Hifiman mode off and XSpace is off, it is a true to source output. Now, iFi gives you a dual mono design on this. This has a incredibly sophisticated chassis design. It's not like a cheap amp that they just, put a lot of power to and jacked up the price because it has a metal case and all that stuff. It uses Panasonic caps. It's using components sourced from Japan. Very high quality products, which means reliability. So it's built incredibly well and it's designed to perform at a very high level, both from a measurement standpoint, but long-term ownership standpoint. Going back to the flat signal, it's not altering the sound, and because it's using high quality components, you have a very, very low noise floor, inaudible to the human ear. Even measurably, it's incredibly low. It's well beyond what you'd ever be able to pick up. So it has a very clean signal, and because of the high power output with low distortion, you get these headphones sounding incredible. The power output is quite amazing, and I'm not going to play around and say this is going to totally change your sound stage and this is going to expose every single layer of detail that you've never heard before, because a lot of that comes down more to the headphone and your source of your music than it does a clean amplifier. I find that, you know, some of the iFi products I've listened to in the past, they have a slightly warm presentation to them without any EQ change. They were just a little bit softer and just had a slight warmth to the low mids, upper bass region. This is much more neutral. It is not coloring the sound at all. It measures flat on the frequency response graphs, if you will. So if you plugged in a flat signal chain, whether you have measuring equipment or headphones, it should measure true to what it'll measure on a Gross 43, for example. So very clean output. Now, when it comes to using these presets, what this does, by the way, the Hifiman preset is like a massive boost at 10 hertz. It rolls down all the way up until, like 100, 150 hertz. You have this gradual slope. It's not heavy, it's not muddy, and to an untrained ear, some people may not hear a massive difference. It's just subtle. And what I find that helps with is planar magnetics aren't known for having a ton of slam and deep bass. It's known for having very fast, tight, controlled bass, and you can still get great extension, especially when you step up to the Aria and the HE1000 SE. Even the XS, the Edition XS, has great bass extension, surprisingly for its price. But what this does is it fixes that slight roll off that happens. The 20 to 30 hertz region is more noticeable without any EQ. So this fixes that, and it just adds that little bit extra to kind of make the music sound more full. And then on the highs, the magic to me is what they do to the treble. Hifimans are known to have a dip in the upper treble. The 2000 hertz region always has a dip. They scoop it out a little bit because by then following a ramp up to like your 4 kilohertz region, it adds through frequency response more of an airy sound stage, a nice light sparkly sound stage, if you will, because the treble can get a little bit peaky in some areas as well, again depending on the Hifiman model. So this preset is addressing the sub bass subtly, so it's not ruining this clear, incredible presentation that a lot of Hifiman headphones have, but it's also fixing that dip at 2000 hertz. It's a 4 decibel lift approximately at 2000, and then it rolls as you get closer to 1000 hertz and rolls back down as you approach your 4K. So it fixes the biggest, issue that some people may have with Hifiman is that dip. The good news is if you like that dip because you like that airiness and soundstage, just turn that button off. Now lastly, they actually smooth over the treble just slightly as well. It basically softens the peaks of your upper treble. So what this did for me on nearly every model here is it makes it easier to listen to at medium to higher volumes. I don't want to say high because I don't listen to it at ear damaging levels. That's not good for your health. But it's noticeable over long listening sessions that it gets rid of that shout just slightly. I like a little bit of the extra bass and warmth that it brings, and I love that it kind of brings that mid-range back up. One example, there's a jazz song from Gregory Porter and Lonesome Lover, and his voice sounds great on the right setups, but that track also exposes some harshness in certain headphones or speakers. I have a demo playlist that I test everything on, so I'm familiar with my music. And the Hifiman mode made that song easier to listen to, and even more so when the sax comes in towards the second half of the song. It just gets rid of that shout just a little bit. And whether you like having custom EQ in your headphones or not, having it be less fatiguing for longer listening sessions is a huge bonus for me, and it made songs like that more enjoyable. Now, are there songs that are mixed differently that I find the flat profile to sound better on? Absolutely. So the benefit is you have a button that you can turn on and off. Now, XSpace is a crossfeed technology. It's supposed to have a little bit better blending of your left and right channel. If you're not familiar what crossfeed is, there's a difference of hearing two-channel audio with speakers because your right ear is still hearing the left speaker and your left ear is still hearing the right. The difference is the timing from the two as it hits your ear, and that's how your ear is able to determine left and right channels. So crossfeed is a technology that blends the channels just slightly to have a more natural representation of the sound from what you would hear on a speaker. So you could kind of imagine it can help with soundstage. I find that using the XSpace in some cases was a little bit, I don't want to say too sharp or airy. It did noticeably impact the treble more than anything else. And on a couple songs, it made the treble sound a little bit more thin, a little bit sharper. And in other songs, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, holy cow, it really opens up. So I think the biggest benefit to this is that you can turn these things on and off because depending on what you're listening to, how your ear is shaped, what your ear preferences are, you're going to like different characteristics. So this is a great stack to use if you're unsure and you don't want to commit to one. Now, yes, you can do custom EQ. You can still do custom EQ with this. However, on things like my Mac, which doesn't really allow global EQ that well without messing around with certain software, I just love that I can plug this in and hit a button and make all of my Hifimans sound a little bit different. I really like the HE1000 SE as it is without doing any EQ, and it has a different frequency response than some of these. iFi has their own chart on what they think is like a good, better, best pairing, and where these really shine, I think the iFi Signature Edition, the HFM Edition, is better on the Sundara open back. The Sundara open bag. This is a Sundara. The Edition XS, which is new and it uses stealth magnets, and the Aria Stealth were my favorite three to use with this. Now, I brought some of the other guys over, so the new Deva Stealth sounds different than the old Deva headphones. These guys over here, these have Bluetooth. They come with a Blue Mini dongle, which I actually have attached to it right now. If you want to plug that into an amp, you can. Now, would I buy a $300 Deva with Bluetooth with a $600 stack? No. To me, like the $400 price range is the lowest I would spend on a stack like this. Even though it does work really well on a $100, $200 HE400, going back to what I was getting at before I get sidetracked. So the HE-R9, this is a closed back dynamic headphone from Hifiman. Very, very different design, as you can see. They're beautiful. They sounded so different. I was like, this is going to sound pretty weird on this stack because this is, I think, intended more for the signature Hifiman planar sound. But again, on some songs, I actually liked that it lifted that 2 kilohertz region. They definitely didn't need the bass boost. These things are very warm. Basically, if I had to describe this, if you're familiar with the Meze 99 Classics, $300 headphones, these are similarly priced. It's a very warm, bass-heavy, intimate-sounding headphone. Sounds nothing like any of these. But XSpace with the Hifiman Edition preset on, because again, that bass boost is subtle. It's not totally making this unbearable, but that extra presence up top actually made those sound better in some songs too. So I was surprised. I'm bringing that up because even though you don't have a Hifiman headphone, you may like having an amp that has a button to change the sound characteristics. So take a look online, look at the Sennheiser version, look at the Meze audio version because they have different charts and pairings and they have totally different sonic signatures to them. All right, now it's time to talk about competitors, and this trio to me represents some of the best bang for your buck setups in the $600 range, and they all do things pretty differently. So you have the Hifiman EF400, which is $600. It's noticeably wider, slightly shorter, and it has everything built in. There's no external power supply. The power supply is in here. This has XLR outputs, and it has an RCA output, but it also only has a USB in, just like the Zen Signature stack. Now, when you go to the topping A30, D30 stack, this is a $600 setup. This has all the inputs and outputs. So if you're looking for, if you're a numbers person, you're concerned with the highest possible power output at $600, your topping stack's going to do that. This also gives you optical and coax in addition to USB, so it can be a little bit more flexible. The power supplies are built into this as well, but they both have a 120 volt input on them. Now, as far as specs and sound quality goes, Hifiman uses their Himalaya DAC found in the new Deva Pro. It's an R2R DAC, or resistor ladder DAC. It has a very different sound profile than what these use, which is a Delta Sigma DAC. It's a solid state. So there's tube, there's solid state, and then you have your resistor ladder DACs or ring DACs. Basically, those are the big three. So I reviewed the EF400 and I love this amp. It's a ridiculous amount of fun to listen to. And when it came to sound staging and presentation of the headphones, as far as where I would put this, so as far as compression, intimacy, the narrowness of the presentation, the topping is the most, I guess, compressed or narrow sounding. It's very, very quiet, clean amp, but it's not letting the music kind of air out and ring, if you will. It just has a little bit of a dark spot after every note hits. That's just the sound signature of this. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's where it stands. So with the iFi stock audio output, the flat output, this would be second on the list. So it has a little bit more airiness, a little bit more soundstage, and a more lively presentation than what the topping stack gives you. The Hifiman, both with NOS or without NOS oversampling, the NOS mode to me was the most enjoyable for my Hifiman headphones because it's a little bit smoother sounding. It helps with the treble grain just a little bit. That stepped up of the three in their flat sound, had the most airy musical presentation. It just seemed a little bit more alive, a more analog, true to the source presentation. Now, where it gets confusing is the HFM and the XSpace presets. Enabling any combo of the two seems to swing the soundstage in openness and letting the note ring an extra a couple times. That was improved on the iFi Zen Signature Set. So it can certainly keep up with the soundstage and imaging and fun presentation of the EF400. It just does it a little bit differently. Now the topping's not giving you any controls to adjust sound quality. There's no, you do have filters actually, I should say that. There are a ridiculous amount of filters. I have a full review coming out on the DAC. The filters do change the way it sounds as far as attack and decay goes, but when I discuss how this presented to these, that doesn't change. It affects it, but ultimately as far as how they stack up, these air out just a little bit more. But this is your powerhouse. This is the thing that has all the inputs and outputs, that thing that measures well. However, to me, from a musical standpoint, these just play music a little bit better, and it was more enjoyable to me. And I don't need that extra power overhead. I don't care about, having the lowest possible signal to noise ratio or total harmonic distortion, etc. What I want to do is plug in my headphone, hear no hum, turn it up, have no distortion, and have my music be enjoyable to listen to. I guess I'm just simple that way, but all three of these are excellent. I'm not knocking this, and I'm not knocking the Hifiman EF400. And I'm also not saying this is the best one out there. I think they all have their own pros and cons. They do things so differently, even the design of them. So anyway, I hope this review didn't make it harder to decide. I hope you kind of understand where to go. Now, as far as what's been sitting on my desk, I've been using the topping stack where my 2-channel setup is. It's been connected to where my turntable is, my PHO 500 preamp from Vincent. This has been a great headphone amp setup for my whole 2-channel station over there. On my desk, I've actually had both of these set up for a while now. I was just using the EF400, but now that I got some more Hifiman headphones that I'm reviewing, I've been playing with this more, and I just love that HFM preset. It sounds so good, and then I don't have to deal with EQ. I just plug it in, hit a button, and that allows me to enjoy the music more. So they're both great. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope I helped to answer any questions you may have had, and you learned a little bit more about this new stack, or a stack from iFi. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I have, as you can see, I haven't covered a lot of these headphones. I actually have 5 coming. The XS and all 4 of these, the Sundara closed, open, HER9, and the new Deva Pros, along with some other gaming stuff. So the channel's growing a lot. Thank you as always for the support. Thank you iFi for sending this to me. And with that being said, I'll see you next time.